If you just joined us, I'd like to welcome you to this Institute of Internal Auditors 60-minute webinar, Disruption, Change, Transformation, Coping with Organisational Change and the Role of the Internal Audit, presented by Anthony Wilson and Paul Guinard. Now, for those who don't know Anthony is the founder of Proximity Risk and Assurance, a niche consultancy focused on equipping frontline business employees with the training and skills to perform their roles in risk management. Over the past 10 years, Anthony has been the General Manager of Risk and Safety and then the Chief Audit Executive at Woolworths Limited. Now, for those who don't know Paul is the founder and director of the Capability Institute, an organisation dedicated to transforming organisations, people and teams into change and transformation agents, helping people and teams face the challenges and seize the opportunities for the digital and fourth industrial revolution. Hi there, Anthony. Hi there, Paul. Anthony, I'm going to start with you. I'm opening your mic. Hello there.
G'day, Michael. Good morning.
And Paul, I've opened up your mic as well. Anthony, I'm passing control to you first. Enjoy the session, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Well, good morning, everybody. Lovely to see so many people turn up this morning. I hope we give you a great session and you get something out of today. Good to see some familiar names on the attendee list too, so welcome to everybody. I guess what we might do initially, we've seen the introduction slide of who Paul and I are, and just to confirm too, Michael, we will make sure that everybody gets a PDF of the presentation at the end of this, so you can look at those details a little later on. Firstly, we might just go straight to slide 4, which is the contents and what we're going to talk about today. So we believe that what we're talking about today is the biggest risk and opportunity for organisations, and that is disruption, change and transformation. So organisations can either have this done to them or they can take advantage of it. So in looking at that biggest risk and opportunity, we'll look at the strategic and tactical role of capability, and we'll give you some tips about capability in action. How does it work? How do you make this thing come to life? The next section of the presentation will actually talk about risk functions such as audit. What is the role that they perform in this face of disruption, change and transformation? And how should auditors and others in assurance functions become involved in this corporate change, innovation and transformation capability? So that's what we're going to have a look at today. So we'll get straight on with it. So firstly, disruption. So there's many challenges that organisations face today, and they come in all shapes and sizes, whether they're the common things you hear about like big data or, automation and, self-driving vehicles and other sorts of technology. We also have massive projects and change and innovation and all sorts of things going on where projects are rolled out in organisations. Unfortunately, the statistics for successful completion of some of those projects is not great. So there's that challenging organisation as well. This was an interesting piece from the Harvard Business Review. Only 8% of leaders are good at both strategy and execution. Right? So you're either good at strategy or good at execution, but very few are good at both, which is a bit concerning. We've also got this whole risk confusion that's around. So what's appetite and what's tolerance and capacity for organisations, and how do we interpret risk and how do we leverage it for the benefit of the organisation? And there's also then this thinking around which category you fit in as a leader in organisations. So are you a problem solver, a problem preventer, someone that does continuous improvement, or very rarely a creator of a whole new future? So all of these things are bubbling around and creating disruption in organisations. And what you can see there is a list of some of the common challenges businesses are faced nowadays, whether that's competitors using innovative business models or technology, providing both the opportunities and threats, whether the consumer is changing and expecting a whole hell of a lot more, all sorts of things. And I'm sure each of you could come up with a list that would add to that or be very peculiar to your organisation. In the end, it's all summarised by the box in the bottom left-hand side there. You could have threats that aren't faced, opportunities that are not seized, and therefore leave the organisation vulnerable to this disruption. But is this just Paul and I saying this? No, not at all. So if you look at some of the latest research, BDO talks about risk businesses are most unprepared for: technological change and regulatory risk. Most prominent emerging risks: disruptive technologies and geopolitical. Macro trend, likely to have the most impact: regulatory risk, technology. So pretty constant theme with technology in that. McKinsey talks about 4 global forces, and number 2 is the tip of the iceberg: accelerating technological change. You talk about PwC, and this is specific to the banking industry, but has ramifications for all of us. Powerful forces are reshaping banking, and when you think about things like blockchain and Bitcoin and those sorts of things, you can see that that's going to have ramifications for us all. Government's not unaffected. Digital government, turning good governance into the springboard for change and innovation. So government also has to think about its threats and opportunities in the future. BCG, and this is a little difficult to read, but the changes in demand for talent are the first 6 areas up there, and changes in the supply of talent are the bottom 6 areas, but they all revolve around automation, big data, digital, agility, transformation, all those sort of things. So lots of challenges according to BCG. Deloitte talks about a new game and new rules. So how organisations respond to risk and how they cope with this onslaught of risk as they describe it. And then KPMG talks about the top trends, and their trend number 5 is technology enables greater productivity and increases obsolescence risk. So there's a lot of discussion going on and a lot of things that are threatening organisations at the moment. So I'll just hand over to Paul for a moment to go from there.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to meet you all here today on this webinar. So I'll move to the next slide, and so we have disruption, as Anthony has explained to us. So we should actually look at what we want to do and where we want to go. And if everything goes well, we would like to reach the state that you can see there on the right of the slide, where we can seize the opportunities, where we can manage the threats, where we can run projects successfully, we have good people engaged, teams are great, and the organization is agile and resilient. And you can contrast that with the blue box at the bottom left corner there. So we have a big gap between what's on the left and what's on the right. So how are we going to bridge it? And it is our thesis that if we manage a few core capabilities, and we're going to talk extensively about what capability is in a few moments, if we manage these few capabilities, then we will be in a great position to actually cross the divide between the left and the right. And these 4 are change, innovation, transformation, and execution. And I think that's not that surprising, but we'll see why, in fact, they work. So let's focus on these core capabilities. Now, before we go, and after this poll question, and Michael, I think that you are the one actually putting the poll question to the participants. But after the poll question, we look into what capability is. So the poll question is, which of the following do you think presents the biggest challenge for your organization? Now, I can't see it. Michael, can you hear us?
Yes, just opening up the poll question now. So here we go.
Okay,
the poll now is appearing.
Yes.
So what I'll get you to do is go ahead, click a response, and then click submit. So the poll is open for about a minute, but we'll probably close it a bit shorter than that. Everyone's popping in the results wonderfully now. And just as those results are coming through, Paul, what would you typically see when you're asked this question in the past?
Well, we see a pretty good spread, but we expect that the easy answer, in fact, is all of the above. But the other options are there to actually get people thinking about the scope of the challenge that that is faced with the disruptions that Anthony explained to us a moment ago. But I think we should be able to get the results pretty soon. Is that right?
That's right. 10 more seconds, 9 more seconds to go. There is a bit of a spread that will come through, and here's the results now. You should be able to see them just off to your right-hand side.
Okay, so I can see them as everybody else, I hope. So all of the above there is the largest answer. The smaller one, 7%, would be disruptive business models used by new entrants. And I think that's interesting. It suggests, of course, that if there are new entrants, it's going to be very challenging, but it doesn't happen every day. And I think that's probably why we get the lowest percentage there. And the second largest one, 25%, is technological advancement. So that would fit in essentially with the digital revolution and a big chunk of the fourth industrial revolution. I wonder if, Anthony, would you like to say something about that?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think you're right. I think all of the above is the answer that most of us will go to. But I think the technology one is interesting. You talked about the fourth industrial revolution, and I think just based on our experience last week, it might be worth just mentioning what the fourth industrial revolution is. So we're all used to IT and electronics and those sort of things that have helped automate production, and that's technically the third industrial revolution. But when you think about the fourth industrial revolution, we're thinking about things like artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotech, biotech, energy storage, quantum computing, all of those very fast, very rapid, very disruptive technology. So it doesn't surprise me that we see technology as a big score like that. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Anthony. So I'll move on now to what is capability. So we have got several definitions, and the generic definition that you see on the screen now, which is a measure of the ability of the department, organization, or system to achieve its objective. Well, it's good, it's interesting, it doesn't tell us much, it doesn't tell you what we should do about it, how we could use it, or any such important matters. The second one is the existential definition. What an organization must be, must have, and must be able to do to survive and thrive. For example, an organization must be innovative, must have resources, maybe some laboratory resources, financial resources, and must be able to execute successfully to survive and thrive, for example. So it's telling us a little bit more about how we could actually tackle the challenge of capability. And the third one, which we call the environmental and skills definition, is the quality of the work environment, including structure, infrastructure, processes, resources, and skills, attitudes of people and teams. So here we are actually saying what are these things that we must have, and must be able to do. So we can actually start planning about what to do to reach our objective or develop our capability. And finally, the last one is the synergistic operational definition, which is the amount of synergy one creates and engages between the factors that determine success. And here are three important points: the personal level, the team level, and the organizational level. And in fact, this last definition says, well, look at the third definition, the environmental and skills definition, and it's not quite good enough to address the factors identified in the third definition. One needs to actually create synergy between them, and through the synergy that we are going to achieve objectives. For example, we know that the team could constrain personal initiatives, so constrain personal achievement, personal contribution. The organizational system can constrain the team, and in the same way then restrict the impact that the team could have. Now, conversely, of course, if the organizational system is great, structure and so on, everything that goes with it is great, then it would enhance the power of the team, and similarly, it could actually, in a sense, magnify the impact of people. So let's carry on a little bit here. What you see on the left-hand side is pretty much what we had on the previous slide. But the important part here is this lotus, when we call it the lotus, which is our capability model. And you can see here that there are 6 bubbles. And if you can take the time or even scan them, you'll see that each of these bubbles plays a very significant role in the way organizations operate and the way things need to happen inside organizations. Each of these bubbles has got sub-dimensions, typically 3 per dimension. We call these bubbles dimension. And there are issues that are addressed in each of the sub-dimensions. Now, the origin of the model is interesting. It's basically arrived at by looking at what worked in a free market organization. That is, we're outside the firm. We're looking at how the firms compete and manage to have success or not inside a free market. And we have tried to extract what was most important and see how it could be applied, used, modified, so that we could actually use these parameters inside an organization. Now, of course, it's one of the first ones to have thought that bringing some elements from the market would work inside organizations. Let's think of bonuses, for example. But here we have actually come up with a compact model which we can use practically and efficiently, as we are going to see. The other source behind the model are basically management theory of the past 20, 30, or 40 years, and management practice, as you can read it if you subscribe to McKinsey's podcast and so on. So let's move on again and see what else we need to do to reach our objectives then. So we face again this gap between the left and the right that we want to bridge. We know that we want to engage capability. So that's something that we have mentioned just before. We want the organizational capability, the team capability, and the personal capability. Each one represented by the 6 bubbles we saw before. We would like these to actually work synergistically. But this is also on top of the diagram. We see magnify the impact of human brains through the development of capability. And this is essentially our response to the digital revolution and to the 4th industrial revolution, is that whatever objectives we have, we don't, it's okay, of course, to leverage the technology and the opportunities, let's say, of the 4th industrial revolution and the digital revolution, but let's not forget, we need to rely on human brains. So our response is that the solution is to magnify the impact of human brains through the development of capability. So if we try to summarize this model, then in the center, we've got the key element that identifies the main factors that are going to drive the development and the application of capability. We've got the important element there on the left about building synergy. And that's not only between these elements on the left, that is the personal, the team, and the organizational, but we also need to build synergy between the 6 bubbles we see in the center there on the lotus image. And finally, on the right, this is the new element in this slide, is that when we look at capability and what's inside the bubbles there, the dimension in the center and in the sub-dimensions, then we see that capability contains culture. And as you know, I think Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So culture will eat performance, risk management, change and innovation, project and strategy execution for breakfast. And as culture is contained inside capability, if we manage capability well, we're going to manage culture well. And if everything goes well, we should have a good breakfast. And it's all okay to understand what is capability, how we could use it, but we need a simple process. We should take the mystery out of it and say, how are we going to apply it? And we propose the 3 steps, and we use a 3-step process, which is know where you are, know where you want to go, and know how to get there. So on the left there, know where you are. We somehow need to perform some diagnosis of the situation inside a team or an organization. So we have 3 ways. We recommend 3 ways that may work together or sometimes 1 or 2 of them. So the first one on the left there is the vulnerability assessment. And this is a one-person assessment. Let's say a senior manager or the CEO who would do a quick, fill in a quick questionnaire. There's about 20 questions or so in a few minutes, and we'll get some graphics. You see an example there at just above the diagram, which shows where the strengths exist and where weaknesses and opportunities for improvement might exist. So that's one person. Second one is the capability health check. This is a workshop type activity with a representative group of, let's say, division, for example, and then together over a matter of a couple of hours, then we can get a fix and about the situation. And of course, the advantage compared with the vulnerability assessment is there are more people involved. And if it's a representative group, then it is people from different parts and different levels in the organization. Finally, the last one that you can see there, capability as a front line. That means that's essentially here a survey that everybody has the opportunity to fill, so we get a fine-grained understanding of a situation as it is perceived, as it is experienced at the front line. So we call it capability at the front line. But where you want to go, next step, well, then of course we analyze all this using the model, and the model is also behind the know where you are, but we also use it to analyze the results. And finally, once we have identified the opportunities for improvement, then we have to decide how to get there. So again, here the objective, as you can see in the blue tile there, yellow tile is magnify the impact of the human brain. And we have, typically, we produce execution blueprints. So we are leveraging what we know about the success factors. And the success factors are these factors that you see in the center, leadership and management, etc., going from left to right. And so we address the success factors at the start, which enable us then to produce an execution plan or blueprint that is far more likely to actually get us towards the objective that we have set. Second one is that the execution ecosystem is that we recognize that reaching an objective isn't a lone activity. One has to engage a team, one has to pull together in the same direction. So we recommend that there is an execution ecosystem so that the information and the new knowledge and problems and whatever is learned can be shared, and that people can actually leverage off each other, which is another way of saying building synergy. And finally, also we can look at how people react to the situation and the challenges and to the environment that is created by the organization and the teams, and see how it could be improved that will help us get there. So we talk here about a simple, effective, and repeatable process. So in summary here, moving from left to right then, we have diagnostic element, know where we are, know where we need to go in the center, prioritization and identifying the opportunities, prioritization, and then we can move to actually doing intervention and implementing some change, some transformation, some innovation, with the objective of getting us to on the other side of this bridge, towards the right there, where we can seize the opportunities, where the organization is agile and resilient. So I think that covers most points for the definition and some aspects of the use of capability. And I'm going to hand back to Anthony now, so that he can take you to the next part.
Okay,
so Anthony,
thanks, Paul. Thank you very much. So we now have our next poll. So I'm sure Michael's furiously hitting keys in the background, but the next poll question is, how do you think improving capability would assist your organisation? So you've had the opportunity to hear Paul's description of capability, and there's some options there. So if you could have a look at that poll question. Thanks, Michael.
So the poll question is now open. It's open for a minute. I might leave it open for the whole minute. And I should let everyone know, once the poll results are up, you can bring your chat back. And to bring the chat back, click the chat icon, and that will bring your chat back. So you'll probably want to do that once we close the poll off. So I'm just keeping an eye on the results. Okay, we seem to have a very clear winner. And we've got 20 seconds to go before we close off the poll. And 10 seconds to go. Anthony, what kind of responses have you seen in the past when you've asked this question?
They can be very varied, Michael, and it usually depends on the actual organisation's current circumstance. So I wouldn't be surprised that everybody hadn't experienced one of these at some point in time of the organisation's life. But to that end, I would suspect that most people would be indicating E in this one, because the disruption that we're experiencing at the moment is quite large.
And it's exactly what we have here. As you can see, 79% of the attendees have said all of the above.
Yeah, that's that probably. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Okay, yes, I might add, in fact, that probably reflects the depth of experience of the people who answered the poll. In a way, you were hinting at the fact that most people, after a few years, would have experienced the challenges at A, B, C, and D.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's good. That's very interesting. So we might, and just put back our chat boxes, but we might now move on to the next slide. So I guess I just wanted to take a little while to reflect on what happens today when organisations manage change or innovation or projects or anything that an organisation tackles, how they go about it. And I think most of you will be familiar with the Gantt chart on the screen there, whether you've used those in formal projects or used them to organise your own activities. But generally, the path of achieving this change or program or project is fairly well trodden. Assign a sponsor or a business owner, set the milestones, all of the governance, et cetera, get the right resources on board. So I think everybody would be pretty familiar with that in organisations. As I said, pretty well established and recognised. I don't think anybody's been fired for adopting a project management approach to change initiatives. I guess it begs the question then, if that's the case, why do we continue to generate these results and accept them? So if you look at the top left-hand side from Chaos Research, they found that 43% of projects are challenged, 18% fail, and only 39% are what you'd call successful. If you then move on down to the bottom right with ChangeFirst.com's research, they find 28% of projects are abandoned, 46% are behind schedule or over budget, and 80% are not used in the way they were intended. So that's the performance level we're getting out of our traditional approach to managing change, innovation, strategic initiatives, etc. So maybe there's a time to do it a little differently. So somebody must be doing it better. Is there a better way? I had to get a race car in there somewhere. We might just look at Formula One team and how they approach challenges or changes or strategic initiatives. So they, referring to our lotus in the bottom with the 6 dimensions, their mission is firstly to compete in Formula One. So just getting into the competition is a hell of an achievement. Their stretch target would be to win the race, obviously. But they have a whole heap of things that they do around making sure that they're covering off the opportunity and realising that they have to achieve that across these 6 dimensions. So things like setting goals, having reliable cars and fast cars, and making sure they've got good drivers and parts, etc. And making sure that they invest in research and development and build the team, etc. So they think about their approach to challenges and change in the way that we're advocating. As a matter of fact, Jackie Stewart, so for those of you who are a bit younger, might not know Jackie Stewart, but he was 3 times world Formula One champion. And his quote, "There's no doubt that Formula One has the best risk management of any sport or any industry in the world." Now, that's a hell of a statement. You know, some people might feel that's fairly challenging. But if you look at the difference that they've made in Formula One over time, and anybody who follows it would probably be familiar with it. In the 1950s, 15 people died competing in Formula One, so more than 1 person per race in a year. In the 60s, that came down to 14, 12 in the 70s, 4 in the 1980s, and just 2 in the 90s. In 1994, 2 drivers died in the same race, Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna. Then there were no fatalities for 20 years until Bianchi died in 2015. Now, he actually was injured in a race in Japan in 2014, but passed away 12 months later. So they've had an incredibly steep improvement in performance just by applying a different lens. Paul, did you want to add something around that?
Yes, a little bit. For those who have an acute sense of hearing, you would have picked up that I have an accent. So I was born in Switzerland, in the French part of Switzerland, and Jackie Stewart had a villa over there, just a few kilometers from where I was growing up. And he was probably there because of the fiscal advantages offered by Switzerland. And then he stopped racing, and he was still a young man from what I remember, probably in his early 30s or so. And what I remember hearing at the time, and I had a brother who was very interested in car racing and did some car racing afterwards, is that Jackie, somehow someone tapped him on the shoulder. He had won 3 world championships. The sport desperately needed to change its image to survive, and they asked him to retire. We wanted a person, a famous driver who would actually do some PR and would actually drive the changes that Anthony has been talking about from the point of view of the drivers.
Yeah, so that's how the Formula One teams have gone about it. How might we apply it? Well, if you think about this in a business setting, Paul mentioned that the 6 dimensions of that Lotus model have subdimensions, and each of them have 3 subdimensions. So you can see on the screen now subdimensions. So we just take leadership and management as an example. You can see that there are 3 subdimensions: clarity of purpose, direction and plan for execution, whether clear guidelines exist with enough room for exercising initiative, and the quality of management for execution and senior management support. So you can see there are 3 subdimensions to consider when you're thinking about the dimension of leadership and management. So this gives participants a guide on the sort of things they need to be thinking about with each of the dimensions. If we go to the next slide, same for the other half of the Lotus. So, you know, one like customer understanding and focus. The extent to which customer and stakeholder needs drive the work is the first subdimension. Whether our drive towards performance is closely focused on delivering performance to customers, to the extent to which future needs are considered in our planning and development. So those are the things that we ask to focus on when considering the customer understanding and focus dimension. So it gives you an idea of how these things come to life when thinking of those in a business context. If we just move to the next slide, embedding capability is the real key in our view. So having that capability to manage change, innovation, transformation and execution is key to organisations actually being able to make a change. Paul and I have worked with organisations where we've done pilots in a relatively small period of time. You can see at the bottom of this slide 3 months to get a pilot up and running, where you can see visible change in the way the organisation goes about managing its capability. And on the right-hand side, you can see you can expand that into broader use, and ultimately our goal is knowledge transfer to the organisation. So the organisation self-sustains its capability development, and it's built into the organisation DNA. Importantly, same methodology, same language, same infrastructure all the way across. That's what's really good about the capability platform. It gives you that consistency in terminology. So I guess the important thing for us now is just to hand back to Paul so that he can take us through the capability in action component. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Anthony. So, okay, we have talked about capability, what it is, its main elements, main features. Does it work, and has it been tested? So here, on the right there, we have results of our long-term 3-year contract experience during 3 years with a large mining organization. It was BHP Billiton and Mitsubishi Alliance, BMA for short. And it was facilities maintenance management, that is maintaining townships for the miners in different parts of central Queensland in the Bowen Basin. And it was an outsourcing contract, so there was an incentive to perform well. That is, the supplier and BMA had agreed on a profit-sharing contract. So the incentive for the supplier to increase performance was high. The higher performance, the more money they could take at the end of each quarter. And performance was measured with a scorecard, which had about 9 KPIs and some KPIs, and they had safety, performance, and cost-related KPIs. So initially, we started, as you can see, the first dot on the diagram there. That's the first quarter, and it goes in time first to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there was an effort there to improve capability. That is, every quarter we were measuring capability using what I described before as capability at the front line, essentially a survey. So we were measuring capability. There was then a process to identify the opportunities for improvement. For example, let's say in communication, which was certainly one that we worked on initially. And then if there is better communication, a better understanding of communication, then it could be used to improve some processes that were behind the KPIs, therefore improving the KPIs. So by running this process over several quarters, and you could see that we could increase capability, and that led to an increase in performance. And this was very profitable for both the supplier and for BMA. Also, we had, after this was one data set, we had a second data set where, in fact, the capability wasn't mentioned, but somehow we still managed to measure, to get all the data. And then we could see during this time then a line which was going down from roughly here with some dots, and the line was parallel to this one going down. So it told us that not only when one manages capability well, we can increase performance, which can bring substantial benefits. We could also see that when capability is neglected, then it will fall back and that performance would fall with it. So unfortunately, dealing with capability, there is, I suppose, no free lunch. That is, thank you for drawing this line. There's no free lunch. That is, there is no effort to maintain capability at a high level, then it would drop back. And that's what you'd expect. Think of a football team or basketball team. They stop training suddenly, then their capability would reduce. So that was done several years ago, and that on the basis of these results that we pursued the work and decided that it was quite important to go ahead. If you recall, earlier we talked about the vulnerability assessment, the one-person assessment. Here's an example of results produced by the CEO of a mid-sized insurance company. And you can see what is interesting. This assessment looks at 3 different areas: new technology on the left, change, innovation, transformation in the center, and risk management on the right. And it asks questions about systems in place, about leadership. Essentially, it covers the 6 dimensions we have been talking about. There is a couple more questions on capability, but otherwise it covers the 6 dimensions. And what is striking here is, firstly, in a way, the candor with which the CEO answered the question to produce these results, and also how different his assessment of vulnerability is, depending on what area he was looking at. So that's certainly food for thought, and then that's step 1. And following that, then one can more readily start the process of improving and managing capability. Let's look at the other way we obtain results, and that's the capability at the front line. That's the one we use, the BMA, and that's the one that involves everybody. So you recognize on this diagram here the 6 dimensions we have been talking about: leadership and management, leadership. I would like to point to you, leadership and management, organizational model, relationship, etc. And this, it was done for 2 activities. One is performance, and the results are in blue, and in red, that's for risk management. And the target here is a pink line. I hope you can see it. It's just above the circle 3. And so it's telling us here that this diagram that there are, in fact, big differences between risk management capability and performance capability. That is, the quality of the work environment, the characteristics of the work environment are perceived quite differently by the people at the front line, including middle managers, and basically everybody, depending on whether we're talking about performance or risk management. And it's not surprising in a way. Capability is in a way activity specific. And if capability represents the focus that senior management has towards an area, then it would show up in the results. Here, we would say that the focus is stronger on performance than on risk management. We have several results to show you. The next one here is for a larger group, and on two successive years. In dark blue, that's the latest result, and in pale blue, that was a year previously. And what is interesting here is that during the year, there was a massive turnover of staff. As you can see, it's 40%. And of course, we know it. We weren't told that. We discussed it with the client, but we know it because we had the names of every participant to the survey. There was about 160 people in this organization, which was a national organization involved in, active in every state, different regions of every state. And so, even though there is about half the people, nearly half the people have been replaced, you can see that there is hardly any change in the way they perceived the environment at the front line, except for what is in the red circle there. But I'll talk about the red circle in a minute, but the other results suggest that the environment or the organizational aspect are constraining the way capability expresses itself at the team level and personal level at the front line. So it highlights the fact that we have to look at capability at the organizational level, the team level, and the personal level. If we are not being careful, we can make big efforts at the team level, but they may be lost because of the constraints imposed by the organizational structure. Now let's get to this red circle there. The first year there were clearly some disquiet about the reward and appreciation environment. And we're not talking of money, as you have seen when Anthony was showing the sub-dimensions. Sure, there's a financial component, but there is many other aspects. That's why it's called also appreciation or recognition environment. And we flagged that, but not enough action was taken, and this disquiet stayed, obviously, even among the new entrants, the new staff. No, we can't say that the massive turnover was simply due to let's say, the challenges there, the rewards and appreciation environment, but it certainly played a role. So this is quite useful information to have, and seeing diagrams like that should actually prompt a lot of reflection among the senior management team. Something slightly different, but the same principle, and you recognize the 6 sectors there that correspond to the 6 dimensions we've been talking about. And this is in one organization, supervisors and middle managers in a civil engineering firm, not a very large group. And you can see that there is a big difference between supervisors and middle managers. And the supervisors are pretty happy. These people would typically control a small group that's doing the work outside, on fields, on site. And the middle managers, well, they are much less happy. Perhaps they felt a bit like meat in the sandwich, and they're not very happy about what's happening or what they get down from senior management. So we know that change initiatives depend a lot on the attitude of middle managers for success. If we don't know that there is issues as seen, as perceived by middle managers, then it's very hard actually to embark on some initiatives that are likely to be successful. In this case, I think that will be quite dubious. And the arrow points to the 6th dimension, which is the reward and recognition environment. And the results are very low, as you can see there. There's some deep red, pink, and so on. It's depressed. So it's not even sure whether these middle managers are going to stick around if there is any change at all. So that would actually suggest strong action and not very much at all. If you recall, I also mentioned the personal capability lens. So this diagram is a bit like the others, but there's a different meaning. The sectors that you can see in green here, again green here, and some are in pink and yellow, are actually the scores given by a participant to a capability of a frontline assessment. So these are the answers to the question that were put to him or her. And in blue, that's the answer, the average of the answers in the team. And there was about, it wasn't a big team, we had many small teams, so we had between 5 and 10 people here. And you can also see the target in pink there, just above the result 3. And what is striking here is how different this person's results are from the average of a team. Sometimes way above, sometimes way below, and occasionally pretty much on the average. And what it means is that people perceived the environment differently. The quality of the environment is perceived differently at the front line, depending on let's say, the characteristics of the people involved and so on. So we are talking of the same team here. So it's very hard to create an environment that is going to suit everybody. But if we want to have a top-performing team, then we need that type of information, and we can use it. We can use it in the following way. It is we we say we rather than the client because this is confidential information. We can't release personal results like this to managers. But we could go to these people and explore with them what is working well, where they produce, where the results are in the dark green area there. Things work well in the environment from their point of view. We need to understand where things don't work well, for example, where there are pink sectors there. And if we collect this information, then we will much more, or we will be able to report to management and give information that will enable management to create an environment which is far more likely to be conducive to high performance by more people in the team. So it's a challenge, but I think it can be addressed. And by doing that, the teams will be better tuned and the results will be better. For the capability, results will be better for the team. And we have seen before that if we can improve capability, we're going to boost performance, and whether it is performance for risk management, change or innovation, and so on. And I think it's time for me now to hand control back to Anthony.
Thanks, Paul. And I think as you do that, I think next up we've got the final poll of the session. So we will move on to that one. So the poll question is now on the screen. Michael's obviously right on the job. So what role do you think internal audit should play in improving capability in your organisation? So please have a look at those. This question's probably a little bit more challenging than the last couple. Michael, I'll get you to administer as usual.
Thanks, Anthony. I noticed that there's been a few questions, which I just spotted them now, and maybe we should actually try to answer them. Yeah, I've been answering as I've gone along, so if there's anything specific, yep, that'd be good. No. Okay, thank you for addressing that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So we've only got 10 seconds left on the poll question, so if you've not popped in a response, do click submit. If you click submit, I can bring up the results instantaneously. If you don't click submit, we have to wait 20 seconds before I can bring the poll results up. All right, so the poll results are coming through. There's a bit of a sort of dominated by two of the possible responses that we've got. I've got 10 seconds. I'm going to leave it as a secret this time so that you can sort of speak to the results there, Anthony. So here we go, and I'm bringing up the results now. Okay. Wow, okay. So as we can see, a very strong result for two, as Michael's indicated, so partner with other functions to promote the benefits of improved capability at 55 and help the board and senior management understand the opportunity that capability presents at 39. Small, almost minuscule response for focus on capability in internal audit, and just a few that believe that audit doesn't have a role in this. So interesting results. Paul, did you have anything you want to add for that or comment on that result?
Yes, I think these results are very encouraging because it means that the audit function here, according to the results, should be outward looking towards the business, very much so, towards assisting the board and towards improving capability broadly to achieve business objectives. So I think that's great. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, thanks, Paul.
And we did that poll question deliberately before we launch into this next section, which is the role of the audit function in capability. So we'll just walk through this at the moment. So the first question obviously is change, innovation, transformation and execution, or SITE, if you want to call it that, on the risk radar at all. So whether the risk function is talking about this as a risk is the first question. We think we've talked enough today about why there's this challenge and opportunity in front of you. Therefore, we think that the audit function should play a key role in making sure that the organisation has this capability, that they can execute and do what it needs to do to add value. And, you know, alternatively, that gives audit the opportunity to be involved and to really add value. The risk of projects failing is real. We've seen that in the statistics, and I think audit can play a key part by auditing the actual capability and whether it's improving or not. It's probably done to some degree nowadays in terms of projects, when you have a look at a project and how well it's being governed, but there's probably much more that audit can do in this space. We can also think about this from the terms of how that should look. So the business should obviously use its capability to do its day-to-day activities, solve business problems, take advantage of opportunities, all those sort of things. But also audit can help and should help with the overall development. So it can help identify any gaps, it can audit the baseline, but then also the ongoing capability, and it can also make sure it gets reporting to senior management and the board where that area requires improvement, and also what are some of the recommendations to make that improvement. So in other words, it should be about helping ensure that site projects are reduced from a failure perspective, or the likelihood of them succeeding is increased. So an important little piece there. The audit professional then becomes somebody that can raise awareness to the board about this risk and this opportunity. Makes sense. The business owns the risks, and that should always be the case. But the audit function can help highlight this opportunity to improve the capability and reduce risk and uncertainty. So your role as an audit professional, in our view, you become essential to business success. You move from finding problems to identifying opportunities, move from a policing style function, and I know many audit departments are beyond that, but sometimes they're seen as the police, to a key enabler of success. You get greater acceptance and appreciation in the C-suite, demonstrating that improved capability delivers sound risk management and strong business performance, and hopefully at the end of the day increases your own status, rewards and respect. So with that, we'll hand over to Paul for the last summary. Over to you, Paul.
Yep, thank you, Anthony. So, well, we talked about capability, the origin, what it's aimed at. If you recall, we also talked about an ecosystem, that is, capability has to engage with three levels of the personal, the team, and the organizational. And it can't be done if there isn't an ecosystem that supports that. And the ecosystem is facilitated by adequate software, for example. So what is the philosophy at work behind capability and behind then ecosystem? Then it's communication, communication, communication. Learn to share and share to learn. I think that's reasonably obvious. And this has got to take place in the different areas of the organization, and in the tool or platform that we use, it's also possible to specify who is going to be the beneficiary of an activity. It's a bit different from the idea of the customer is the person who should know, should be aware, may not be a direct customer, but it's part of this communication ethos that we want to promote. And for example, also, when we implement capability, there are actions that are required in the 6 dimensions we're talking about. And sometimes, and that's the idea of communication, is that an action can be requested by someone in a team, an action that the boss should be doing. For example, we need more support. And if this type of communication does not take place, then of course it's going to be much more difficult to achieve the results that are much better than what Anthony told us about the failure rate of projects, for example. Anthony, that's probably all I would like to say. Would you like to say something else before closing?
No, I think you're right, Paul. This is very much about a practical and real approach to making a difference to the organisation. And, you know, this is simple language, simple methodology, big problems and big challenges and big opportunities, but the solution is kept very simple. So I think that's the key thing.
There were a few questions that came into the chat box or comments at the very end. One of them here, where was it? Did I see? Was something to the effect of, we also need to improve audit capability on the SITE aspects. Did you see that comment there from Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I've just shot a note off to that one.
Oh, you have already. Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. As auditors, we need to improve our own capability as well to be able to, assess capability and track its performance. So he's spot on.
And just this last slide, did you want to speak to it or any final comments around that?
I think it's self-explanatory for the participants. So if you were going to go and do something around this space, I think it's key that you start with a baseline, as we do with most activities. Make sure you get key functions on board with you, risk, change management, strategy, those sort of people. You are probably going to be charged with educating the C-suite and the board, so think about how you might take them on this journey. A pilot is often a good way to do this, just prioritise a particular area and focus on that. And then on an ongoing basis, audit where your capability is and how it's improving and prove the ROI. So that's about it. So unless there are any other questions, I think Paul and I are open to those. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody, for attending and sparing your valuable time for us.
Thank you very much.
I just want to appreciate that. Paul and Anthony, thank you very, very much for presenting today. It was a pleasure to have you here. Just to let everyone know that there is a feedback form that pops open. Please take the time to fill that in. It will be great feedback for Paul and Anthony, and also great feedback for the Institute of Internal Auditors as well. I'm not seeing any further questions coming through. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again. We certainly look forward to seeing you in future Institute of Internal Auditors webinars, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.